Thank you very much, Davide. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. It's great to see such a great turnout here this evening in Milano. Alrighty, let's get into it. In 1991, there was one website. Now, in 2025, there are over 1 billion websites. 1.1 billion to be exact. If we think about this on a growth curve, we can picture a big old hockey stick, up and to the right. In other words, the internet has grown exponentially over the past 30 years or so, giving rise to entirely new forms of media, like the World Wide Web, new institutions, new industries, new businesses, even new forms of capital and coordination, which is why we're here gathered today. We can largely argue that the first era of the internet unified information. Take, for example, Ethereum's Frontier launch in 2015. There was one smart contract. Now, over 50 million smart contracts have been deployed. Does that remind you of anything? The one website to 1.1 billion websites in just under 30 years? The same thing is playing out. Exponential growth is what drives these internet-based technologies, and I'd argue blockchains and crypto are necessarily one of them. The next era, and the reason we're all gathered here today, is going to unify money. And this is where Stargate comes in. Stargate is solving, has been solving, and aims to continue solving the movement of liquidity between blockchains. So, how does this look, and why does it matter? When we think about the blockchain industry, obviously, as I mentioned, Ethereum pioneered programmable blockchain technology, introducing the ETH token as the native gas token on the Ethereum blockchain. But since then, we've had a Cambrian explosion of blockchains. There's now over 100 blockchains, right? Maybe coming up to close to 200 blockchains that are seeing user activity on a daily basis and seeing lots of secured value and novel financial products being innovated. Each one has their own architecture, their own consensus layer, and their own user base, right? I personally use 25 to 30 different blockchains almost every day, but that's because I work at the Stargate protocol and I contribute to the Stargate protocol, so I'm moving money between all of these different ecosystems on a daily basis. So when we think about what's driving this growth, what's allowing, in the same way that the early internet brought clusters of computers that were based in research labs and academic institutions together, what's allowing this to happen in crypto? This key concept of interoperability has been spoken about a couple times today, and I want to touch on it in a little bit more depth. We need to figure out, well, actually we don't. Interoperability is solved, and this is a bit of an internal joke, and if you're on the sort of interop CT space, you might hear us say that interop is solved. Stargate is built on top of the LayerZero protocol. Currently, the LayerZero protocol has sent hundreds of millions of messages between chains, right? That's an amazing feat, and it's done so in a fully secure and trustless manner. I think that's a testament to the same way in which the early internet was connected by transmitting data packets between remote networks of computers, sort of creating a network of networks. The same thing is happening in blockchain. But it's a little bit more difficult when it comes to the liquidity layer. How can we move capital? Whilst messages between chains are generalizable and we can move messages in a sort of arbitrary way, it's just data encoded into a payload in the form of a bytes array. It's much more difficult when you need to move hundreds, if not thousands, of different assets, each with their own TVL, each with their own home chain. It becomes quite a technical problem to solve. This is what we're solving at Stargate, and indeed have been solving for the past 3 years.
Liquidity should never stop at a border. Without trust, movement is never truly free. Enter Stargate, the global solution to move money on-chain. Secure, trusted, proven at scale. This is the new standard.
This better work. Take me to the next slide, please. Fun fact, actually, whilst we wait for the next slide to come through, we actually opted for the AI voiceover instead of my own voice. So just a careful reminder to everyone that even in crypto, AI might be coming to replace your job. Anyway, let's get back to it. So the global liquidity layer has been established. I talked a little bit about the problem that needed to be solved in the past 3 years, the LayerZero messaging protocol that underpins Stargate, allowing different blockchains to communicate with each other. Well, this is what Stargate looks like right now. This is live and in production. You can use this on a daily basis at any time. It's always running 24/7. It's permissionless, it is immutable, and it's always on. That's one of the greatest benefits of our industry. Have a look here. Pools, Hydra, and OFTs. These are the 3 key pillars of growth that I want everyone to take away when we think about this slide. In 2022, Stargate launched, the Stargate V1 protocol launched to sort of remedy the thankless state of bridging. Now, I know we're probably all familiar with the keyword bridging in our space, right? As the Cambrian explosion of different chains has taken place, we've needed to move assets from chain A to chain B, token A to token A on a different chain, right? I think what it did here is Stargate V1 pioneered some incredibly elegant on-chain logic, also known as the Delta algorithm, that deployed a unified liquidity pool across the major L1s and L2s at the time. So the likes of Ethereum mainnet, of course, Greater Ethereum, Arbitrum, Base, but also some of the alternative L1s like Binance Smart Chain and Avalanche. But as this Cambrian explosion continued to pick up in pace and the industry continued to accelerate, we needed something different, something built to scale, something capable of meeting users where they were going. We talk a lot today about experimentation, right? Our industry experiments so much in such a quick way, and I think what we saw in the past cycle was an explosion of chains. So we step out one layer, we go to Hydra. Hydra is Stargate's liquidity as a service offering. Now, I'll come back and talk a little bit more about Hydra in just a second and what it has in store that's going to change the future of how money moves on chain. But for now, you can see that Hydra has already gained widespread adoption, having been deployed on 30 networks in the second outermost layer here on this screen. The likes of Bearer Chain, Flare, Rari Network, Varna, all the chains are doing different things. Hydra brings liquidity there on day one at scale. Finally, we have OFTs, standing for omnichain fungible tokens. The multi-chain thesis was cool. I'd raise that the omnichain thesis is even cooler, right? The omnichain fungible token standard is designed and developed by LayerZero Labs. It is the most widely adopted token standard for moving assets, moving money, and moving value across chains. It's currently dominating the market share with roughly 80% of cross-chain messages and billions of dollars that are running through the standard, essentially. So yes, I'd like to remind you that this is live and in production. You know, we focus a lot on user experience. I spend a lot of my time talking to users, trying to understand how they use the protocol, the chains they're going to, the kinds of innovations, the financial applications, the dApps, the staking, the stablecoins, whatever they're after, I like to hear about it, and it's all happening on these chains that Stargate is connected to. So how does this translate into raw data? What do the numbers tell us? What are the key performance indicators that we can look at? Davide mentioned before I came up that Stargate is indeed one of the biggest protocols in the space, having done $65 billion in lifetime volume. That's no small feat. In fact, it's been 1 year since Stargate V2 launched. Stargate V1 came 3 and a bit years ago, so 50% of that transfer volume happened in the last year. So that goes to show Hydra may be having its hockey stick moment. 250 OFTs. That's a lot of coins and a lot of pathways that users can send money to and from different blockchains, as I say, into different applications for different strategies, whatever they may be interested in doing, right? It's freedom, right? The reason I talked about the internet at the beginning of this speech is because on the internet, information moves incredibly freely. The same needs to happen with our space, and this is what Stargate is doing. It's allowing liquidity to move incredibly freely at scale on demand. 80 chains supported, right? That's one of the most interconnected cross-chain protocols, and the technology has been designed to be seamless to deploy and allow liquidity to move at scale on day one. So, the engine behind the global liquidity layer. As I said, I talk a little bit more about Hydra. Hydra is a fantastic innovation when it comes to moving money cross-chain, right? What it does is it offers 3 key benefits: compliance, a canonical solution, and a composable architecture. Those are the 3 C's that I'd like you to take away when we think about Hydra. It's compliant. Day one access to compliant, battle-tested stablecoins like USDC and USDT. Currently, Hydra issues USDC, USDT, that's Circle and Tether, as well as wrapped ETH, right? Allowing ecosystems, as I say, on day one, to bootstrap that ecosystem. It could be $1 million, it could be $100 million, right? With Bearer Chain going live in early February, we saw over $1 billion on day one move into Bearer Chain. That is sort of not reproducible. You don't find any other canonical solutions, call it a canonical bridge, or a sort of transfer protocol that can move that scale, that much liquidity on day one. Finally, it's composable. So when you tap into Hydra, when you deploy Hydra as a canonical compliant standard, those assets, the USDC, the USDT, and the wrapped ETH, are fully composable. They can be transferred to any of Stargate's other networks, right? Any of Stargate's supported chains, be it back down to Stargate's pools on mainnet or on any of the major L2s or the major alternative L1s, or indeed it could be transferred to another protocol that has, another chain that has deployed Hydra, right? Be it from Bearer Chain to Abstract, over to Story, back to Flare, Rari network. The list goes on. I could probably name them all at this point. I spend so much time looking at them. So here we go. That's just that. So over the last year, Hydra has seen great adoption from the innovators in our space who are pushing new chains for new purposes, right? And all of them need one thing in common. What's that? It's liquidity. And Hydra has done so much work for these 30 networks, allowing liquidity to move in on day one at scale, right? So in a sense, it's sort of a chain-to-chain integration, and they deploy Hydra, allowing users or protocols, dApps, businesses, people building on chain to move scalable size of liquidity in on day one. It's a pretty nice lineup of chains that have gone live on Hydra. That's 30 chains right there, and it will continue to grow into the future. I think it's worth looking at December and January, where we saw 5 or 6 chains a month go live on Hydra. Bearer Chain, Abstract, Codex, Rootstock, Superposition. It was a fantastic couple months connecting all of these chains and letting the money flow, letting the liquidity move into the ecosystem, really giving builders what they need to go and try and build new financial products and to innovate. So taking a case study, right? So key reminder, with Hydra, it's currently moving USDC, USDT, and wrapped ETH into new ecosystems. So if we focus on USDC, which is obviously issued by Circle, we've heard a lot today about Circle's issuance of USDC, one of the major stablecoins. We can see that over time, as Hydra gained adoption, moving from December into the first quarter of 2025, we can see that the trading volume that was happening via Stargate issued USDC, right? Reminder, it's fully compliant. So that USDC can be taken over by Circle at any given point in time. So 40%, up to 40% of all trading volume that was happening for all USDC in circulation was issued by Stargate. And it allowed this liquidity to go to new chains before Circle could get there. Circle have a lot of regulatory needs that they need to jump through, a lot of loops they need to jump through before they can deploy native USDC anywhere. Stargate Hydra moves that liquidity there in an instant. It gets there on demand, and it does it in a way that is fully compliant, composable, and canonical, right? So 40% of all USDC trading volume was happening on a Stargate-issued stablecoin. Likewise, similar metric, but you can see the growth, right? The scalability is so key when it comes to growing crypto and having assets move over to new ecosystems. If you look here, you can see that Stargate issued almost $1 billion of USDC in the months of March and April, right? There's currently 60 billion or so USDC in issuance, right, in circulation. At the peak in April of 2025, so just a couple months ago, Stargate was accountable for just over 2% of all USDC in circulation, right? That's a tremendous feat of a protocol like Hydra. So here's a representation. I said I'm going to talk about what's in store for the future of Stargate, the future of Hydra, and how is it going to scale DeFi? How is it going to connect all of the DeFi ecosystems, all of the chains together in a way that lets liquidity flow at scale and on demand? Well, look at this. Currently, Hydra is accountable for 3 major assets. And so if you trace the line at the bottom to 30, chains, which is currently how many chains Stargate is on, 3 assets, you can see the amount of pathways is 2,500 pathways, which is interesting if we're thinking about how much information can flow, how much money, how much liquidity can flow. 2,500 pathways is interesting. But if you think about the website, there's probably many, many orders of magnitude more pathways that people can interact with websites on the World Wide Web, for example. So our plans are to continue growing Hydra. Any asset that wants to be issued via Hydra can essentially reach out and have a Hydra deployment. And over time, if we scale that up, as and when we do this, if we had 10 assets issued by Hydra, we'd see 35,000 pathways for liquidity to flow. There isn't a liquidity transfer protocol that comes close. That would be a tremendous feat, allowing users, user first, to go to any chain with unlimited size, right? It's important to remember that you can essentially move $1 million from chain A to chain B for one-to-one capital efficiency, no slippage, right? For minimal fees. It's a truly scalable system. So what comes next? As I'm saying, I heard a lot of people talking about Europe today, politically, economically, and in terms of stablecoins, right? Hydra is already responsible for USDC and has done tremendous work for expanding and extending the Circle stablecoin. Well, this is Europe's stablecoin at the moment. I know that we have innovation, we have room to create new stablecoins that aren't necessarily issued by someone like Circle. However, this is the one that's seen the most adoption so far. And the Stargate DAO, which is who the Stargate Foundation, which is where I work, sort of supports. We support the growth and development of the Stargate DAO, one of the most widely known and successful DAOs in the space. They approved the issuance of Eurocoin, EURC, as part of Hydra. So Hydra is going to be taking Eurocoin, EURC, to all of these new chains, accelerating Europe. Come on, guys, let's get excited by that. That's a fantastic thing for Europe, right? As we said, $60 billion of USDC, $150 billion of USDT, barely any Euro coins, right? We need it in Europe to expand financial innovation in what has typically been home to much of the ingenious stuff that we see coming out in finance, right? Hydra is going to do the work. Hydra is going to take EURC to new blockchains, allowing people to build applications with it and expand the reach of EURC. I'm very excited about it. So, all in all, Stargate is becoming, if not already is, the standard for programmable money at global scale, right? We can move to new chains quicker than anyone else. We can extend assets, be it Circle's stablecoin, Tether's stablecoin, or any other stablecoin that wants to come on board. And we can do it on demand. We've created a global liquidity layer, as you saw in that beautiful visualization of the entire network. I had to put my Galileo thinking cap on for a second so I could really parse it and make sense of all of the different networks. And we're going to continue doing this. And a little note that I wanted to leave. This has been largely focused on the sort of the protocol and how we've grown over time from a sort of user perspective. Everyone can go to Stargate Finance now on the internet and on the web and move money between chains, from Ethereum to Arbitrum, over to Berachain, back to Base, over to Avalanche, into Flare, do some staking over there, come back down to mainnet, whatever you want to do. It's all possible on Stargate, right? And this accelerates DeFi, and it accelerates Ethereum. It accelerates the amounts of assets that we can move between chains. Finally, a cheeky note, that we have an API ready and available for builders that are looking to tap into Stargate's liquidity network, its global liquidity layer, and build applications at scale with instant access to all of the OFTs and all of the assets that Stargate currently has in its fantastic global liquidity layer. Thank you for your attention, and buona notte.